She opened the door and found him standing in her kitchen at 3 in the morning. He shouldn't have been there. He'd been dead for 6 years. What happened next would change everything she thought she knew about the night he died and the terrible secret he'd been hiding. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, a woman who discovered that some mysteries don't stay buried. And some lies are too big to stay hidden forever. Sarah lived in Portland, Oregon, a city known for rain and coffee shops. She was 32 years old, a graphic designer working from home, living alone in a small craftsman house she'd inherited from her grandmother. The house had been in her family for 3 generations. She loved everything about it, the creaky floorboards, the vintage tile in the bathroom, the way morning light filtered through the old glass windows. But there was something she didn't know, something hidden in the walls, something that would surface on a cold October night. 6 years earlier, Sarah's older brother David had died. He was only 28. The official cause was a hiking accident. He knew the trails around Mount Hood better than anyone. But one day he didn't come home. Search and rescue found his body 3 days later. He'd fallen from a cliff near Ramona Falls. It was ruled an accident. The family grieved and moved on, or so they thought. Sarah thought about David often. They'd been close growing up. He taught her how to ride a bike, how to throw a curveball, how to stand up to bullies at school. His death left a hole in her life that never quite healed. But she learned to live with it. She kept his photo on her mantle, a picture from his college graduation. He was smiling, that crooked smile she missed so much. On October 15th, Sarah was working late. A client deadline was approaching. She'd been at her computer for 12 hours straight. Around 11 p.m., she finally called it quits. She made herself a cup of chamomile tea, watched an episode of a cooking show, brushed her teeth, and went to bed. She fell asleep almost immediately, the sleep of the exhausted, deep and dreamless, until her eyes snapped open at 3:14 a.m. Something had woken her, a sound, a creak. The house made noises sometimes, old houses do. She told herself it was nothing, just the wood settling, but then she heard it again. Footsteps, definite footsteps, coming from downstairs. Her heart started hammering. She lived alone. The doors were locked. The windows were locked. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand. Her finger hovered over the 9 on the keypad, ready to call for help. But something made her pause. The footsteps weren't rushed. They weren't the sound of an intruder searching for valuables. They were slow, deliberate, almost familiar. Sarah forced herself to get out of bed. She picked up the baseball bat she kept in her closet. David had given it to her years ago. For protection, he'd said. The irony wasn't lost on her. She crept to her bedroom door, opened it slowly. The hallway was dark, but light was spilling up from the kitchen. She hadn't left any lights on. She was sure of it. Sarah made her way down the stairs. Each step felt like an eternity. The bat was heavy in her hands. Her palms were sweating. She reached the bottom of the stairs. The kitchen was directly ahead. She could see a shadow moving. Someone was definitely in there. She took a deep breath, raised the bat, stepped into the doorway, and froze. The man standing at her kitchen counter turned around. He was holding a mug, her mug, the one with the faded university logo. He looked exactly like her brother. Same dark hair, same brown eyes, same scar on his left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident. But it couldn't be David. David was dead. She'd been to his funeral. She'd watched them lower his casket into the ground. The man smiled, that same crooked smile from the photograph upstairs. Sarah's knees went weak. The bat clattered to the floor. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The man set down the mug. He took a step toward her, and when he spoke, it was David's voice, the voice she'd thought she'd never hear again. He said 3 words. "I'm so sorry." Sarah backed against the wall. This wasn't possible. People don't come back from the dead. She was hallucinating, having a breakdown. Maybe she was still asleep. This had to be a dream, but it felt so real. The man who looked like David took another step closer. He held up his hands, a gesture of peace, of surrender. He told her he knew how insane this looked. He knew what he was asking her to believe, but he needed her to listen. He needed her to understand, because he was running out of time. Sarah's mind was racing, fight-or-flight instincts screaming at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She was paralyzed, staring at this impossible person, this ghost, this stranger wearing her dead brother's face. He started talking, fast, like he was afraid she'd bolt before he could finish. He told her that 6 years ago something happened, something that forced him to disappear. He'd gotten involved with people he shouldn't have trusted, dangerous people, people connected to a federal investigation. He'd witnessed something he wasn't supposed to see, and they'd given him two choices: testify and enter witness protection, or die. He chose the first option. The hiking accident was staged. The body they found wasn't his. It belonged to a John Doe from Idaho, someone who died of natural causes, someone with no family, no one to miss him. The authorities made it work. They had to. David's testimony was crucial. It helped bring down a massive drug trafficking operation. People went to prison. But the organization had reach, even from behind bars. So David stayed dead. He was given a new name, a new life, relocated to a small town in Montana. He'd been living there ever since. Sarah listened to all of this, her brain trying to process, trying to make sense of something that made no sense. She had questions, so many questions. Why now? Why show up after 6 years? Why risk everything? David's expression darkened. He told her about the file, a safety deposit box, hidden in a bank in downtown Portland. He'd set it up before his death. Insurance, he called it. Evidence against people even more dangerous than the ones he'd testified against. People who were still free, still operating. He'd kept it secret, even from his handlers. But someone had found out. 2 days ago, his cover was blown. He didn't know how. Maybe a leak, maybe facial recognition software, maybe just bad luck. But they knew where he was, and they were coming. He had to get the file, get it to the right people, before it was too late. The bank would only release the box to immediate family. That meant Sarah. She was the only one who could help him. Sarah felt like she was drowning. Her brother was alive, but also in mortal danger. And he needed her help. Everything she'd believed for 6 years was a lie. Her grief had been real, but the death had been fake. She didn't know whether to hug him or hit him. Instead, she asked the only question that mattered. "What's in the file?" David's jaw tightened. "Names," he said. "Photos, wire transfers, proof of corruption that went all the way to the top. Judges, senators, people with power, people who would kill to keep it hidden." He'd collected it all as insurance, never thinking he'd actually need to use it. But now, everything had changed. The organization knew about the file. They'd already killed his handler, made it look like a car accident. David only escaped because he wasn't home when they came. He'd been living in his truck for 2 days, driving straight through. No sleep, no food, just running. Sarah felt her world tilting. This couldn't be real, but the terror in his eyes was genuine. The exhaustion on his face was real. She wanted to call the police. But David grabbed her arm. "No cops," he said. They couldn't trust anyone, not until the file was secure, not until they knew who was involved. The wrong move could get them both killed. Sarah pulled her arm away. She needed a minute, needed to think. She walked to the sink, splashed cold water on her face. When she looked up, David was still there. Still real, still waiting. She made a decision, against every instinct telling her to run. She would help him, not because she believed everything he said, not because she understood, but because if there was even a chance this was really her brother, she couldn't turn him away. They left before dawn. David insisted they take her car. His truck was too recognizable. They drove to the bank in silence. Sarah's mind kept spinning, looking for holes in his story, looking for proof this was real. David fell asleep in the passenger seat, snoring softly, the same way he always had. Sarah remembered road trips from their childhood. David always fell asleep within 10 minutes. It was such a specific detail, such a David thing. It made her want to believe. The bank opened at 9 a.m. They were the first customers through the door. Sarah presented her ID. David hung back, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap pulled low. The bank manager verified Sarah's identity, led her to the vault. The safety deposit box was small, unremarkable. Box number 412. The manager inserted the bank's key. Sarah inserted the key David had given her. Both keys turned. The box slid open. Inside was a single thumb drive, wrapped in a note written in David's handwriting. She recognized it immediately. The note said, "For Sarah, I'm sorry, I love you. Use this wisely." Her hand shook as she picked it up. This tiny piece of plastic had cost so much. David's life, 6 years of grief, and now maybe both their lives were on the line. She pocketed the drive, closed the box, thanked the manager. David was waiting outside. His eyes scanned the street constantly, looking for threats. Sarah handed him the thumb drive. His shoulders sagged with relief. They got back in the car. David pulled out a burner phone. Made a call. Sarah couldn't hear the other end, but she heard David's responses. I have it. Yes, she helped. We need protection. Today. He hung up, turned to Sarah. His contact would meet them in 2 hours. A federal prosecutor who'd been working this case for years. She was clean, untouchable. Once they handed over the file, it would be over. Sarah and David could both disappear. New identities, new lives, together this time. They stopped at a diner to wait, ordered coffee and pancakes they didn't eat. David told her about his life in Montana, the small town where everyone knew everyone, his job at a hardware store, the loneliness of living a lie. He'd wanted to contact her so many times, just to hear her voice, but it was too dangerous. Until now, Sarah told him about their parents, how hard they'd taken his death, how their mother still visited his grave every week. David's eyes filled with tears. He'd never see them again. That was the deal. Too many people involved, too many potential leaks, but at least Sarah would know the truth. At least one person in his real life would remember him as he was. Not as a gravestone. At 11 a.m. they left the diner. The meeting point was an abandoned warehouse near the river. Classic thriller movie stuff. Sarah would have laughed if she wasn't so terrified. They pulled into the parking lot, empty except for one black SUV. David tensed. He'd been expecting a sedan. Something was wrong. He told Sarah to stay in the car. She ignored him. They'd come this far together. They walked toward the SUV. The door opened. A woman stepped out. Blonde hair, dark suit, federal badge on her hip. She introduced herself as Prosecutor Linda Hayes. David relaxed slightly. This was his contact. He recognized her from photos. They'd never met in person before. Started to hand it over. Hayes smiled, reached for it, and that's when Sarah saw the second SUV, pulling in behind them, blocking the exit. David saw it too. He yanked the drive back. Hayes' smile disappeared. She pulled her gun. David grabbed Sarah's arm, dragged her behind their car. Bullets shattered the windshield. Sarah screamed. This wasn't supposed to happen. Hayes was supposed to be clean. David had said she was clean. More gunfire. From the second SUV, 3 men in tactical gear. Moving toward them with military precision, David pulled out his own gun. Sarah hadn't even known he was armed. He returned fire. Glass exploded. Metal pinged. Sarah covered her head, praying. This was it. This was how she died, in a parking lot with a brother who'd been dead for 6 years. But then she heard sirens. Distant but getting closer. Hayes cursed, ordered her men to fall back. They retreated to their vehicles. Engines roared to life. Tires squealed. They were gone. David and Sarah stayed crouched behind the car, not moving, not believing. The sirens got louder. Police cars flooded the parking lot. Uniforms everywhere, guns drawn, shouting for them to show their hands. David tossed his gun away, raised his hands. Sarah did the same. They were separated, questioned. Sarah told them everything. It sounded insane even to her own ears. But then a detective arrived. FBI. He knew David's real name, knew about the witness protection, knew about the file. The whole thing had been a setup. Hayes wasn't a prosecutor. She was a plant, working for the people David had testified against. They'd used her to smoke him out. But David had been smart. He'd also contacted real federal agents. They'd been monitoring the meet. They'd called in local police when things went south. The file was authentic. The evidence was solid. And now, finally, it was in the right hands. David would have to relocate again. New identity, new life. Sarah could visit him, under supervision, once a year. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. 3 months later, Sarah sat in a coffee shop in Seattle. David sat across from her, except he wasn't David anymore. He was Michael Chen, computer programmer, originally from Sacramento. He'd been living in Spokane for 3 months, learning his new life. The file had done its job. Indictments were coming down. People were going to prison. Real justice. Sarah and David talked for hours, about everything, about nothing, making up for 6 years of silence. When it was time to go, they hugged. Sarah cried. David did too. They didn't know when they'd see each other again. Maybe a year, maybe longer. But Sarah had her brother back. Not the way she wanted, not the way it was supposed to be, but in some small way, he was back. And that had to be enough. As Sarah drove home that night, she thought about secrets, about the lies we tell to protect the people we love, about the cost of doing the right thing. David had paid that cost, was still paying it, but he'd survived. And so had she. The file was public record now. You can look it up. The Portland corruption scandal of 2025. 17 people indicted, 8 senators, 4 judges, millions in illegal wire transfers. They called it the biggest political scandal in Oregon history. But the news stories don't mention David. They don't mention Sarah. They don't mention the night a dead man showed up in a kitchen, or the thumb drive that changed everything. Those details are classified, sealed, hidden for their protection. But Sarah knows, and now you know too. Sometimes the people we lose aren't really gone. Sometimes they're out there, living different lives, carrying different names, still fighting, still surviving, still hoping that someday they can come home. David never got to come home. David never got to come home. But at least he got to tell his sister the truth. And sometimes truth is the only thing that matters, even when it's wrapped in 6 years of lies, even when it costs everything, even when it means living in the shadows forever. Sarah still has that photo on her mantle, David at his college graduation, that crooked smile. Except now when she looks at it, she doesn't just see a memory. She sees a man who's still out there, still alive, still her brother, and that changes everything. If you found this story as compelling as I did, hit that like button and subscribe for more strange, true stories that sound impossible but actually happened, because truth really is stranger than fiction.